Oh, man. Drop it like it's hot. And, of course, we had to have him on. Friend of the pod. It's coming right here. Locked on Mavs with Tim Cato.
What's up, fella?
It's the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by Michelob Ultra at only 2.6 carbs, 95 calories. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Stay tuned for the Ultra Player of the Week. He may be joining us right now. It's Tim Cato. All right, Isaac. Oh, man. This is quite the day. I'm Nick Angstadt, host of Locked On Mavs. I am the media member and coordinator for the Locked On Podcast Network, and joined, as always, my co-host, contributor at Mavs.com. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
Take it away, Tim Cato. Now, what a day in Mavs land. Is that what Donnie called it not so long ago? Mavs land? Something. But yeah, incredible story today from Tim Cato. Incredible reporting, journalism. I want to give you props for that and hats off for that, because huge stories like that are not easy. And Tim dropped a bomb today.
Tim Cato joining us right now on the podcast on YouTube. If you're watching, he was banned to some like desolate desert planet, I think, just to try and escape. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see him. Tim, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate the time. Let's just start right here. Haralabos Voulgaris is this massive player in this story that you just wrote today. And by the way, if you haven't, it's inside the Mavericks front office. Mark Cuban's shadow GM is causing a rift with Luka Doncic. It's by Tim Cato and Sam Amick on The Athletic. If you have not read it, stop this podcast right now. Go read it, because a lot of this won't make sense to you. So go read the article. It was really great today. Give us the Cliff Notes, Spark Notes version of who Haralabos is. How did he become such a prominent figure, and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you jump people to the story, and they're going to have a good idea. It really is a person who his hiring was announced, and I often got questions about, like, okay, what actually is he doing with the team? What's his role? What's going on there? And it's something I started hearing more and more about over the past few months, and it got to a point where I was like, all right, I mean, I think it's time. I think we're ready to actually go ahead and publish this. And I actually got asked an interesting question earlier in the 1 million podcasts and radio hits that I did before, and it was I was asked, would this story still be out there? Would we be talking about this if Game 3 against the Clippers had gone differently? Yeah, I think we would. We definitely would. It was stuff that I'd been hearing long before that. And ultimately, if you view this not just as a story about Bob and this person and his role in the front office and frustrations that people had with him, but if you also view it as even further than that, an indictment on the front office in a lot of ways, which is not something you need reporting to do. You could look at Game 7 and Luka dropping 46 and 14, and the team just not being good enough to even make that game competitive in Game 7. There's a clear indictment on the front office that has been ongoing for anybody who was watching this team. And I think that's what it is, and that's what the story is fundamentally at its core. And I think that it's something that a Game 3 win and a series win and a one series advancement, that will not have changed the overall overarching idea that there are problems within the front office, that the power structures is and who is in charge is not delineated properly, and all of this stuff needs to be addressed now, because you're looking at Luka Doncic and you're looking at a superstar player who they need to do right by, and that is the most important thing going forwards. Not what the front office actually even looks like, as long as it's working and it's able to build a team around Luka Doncic that he deserves, and that leads to his future with this team to being one that he wants to stay on, as is his current desires and plans to stay here long term. You got to make sure he stays that way.
Yeah, when Haralabos first got hired back in, I guess, 2018, you put in your story, you're like, you tried to do a story for him. He declined to do a story back then. And I remember it was like one of his, it was that fall when the season started. It was my first time I'd ever met Bob. And I met him, it was on the court before a game. And I asked him point blank, I was like, hey man, I'd love to do a story on you. I just want to know exactly like what your role is, everything. And he was nice to me, but it was just a polite, man, sorry, I just can't do it right now. It's hard for me to really talk about like my role with the team. So I think that mystery behind bringing a guy who's, made a living in his popularity off being a sports gambler into a front office of an NBA team, I think it did have a mystery behind it. And then it's like, well, who's in charge? Who's all this? And the fact that you heard about that, you decided to write the story on it. And just like how hard is it, just from a journalism angle, how hard is it for you, a local guy writing about a team you cover, you're around every day, you're one of the few beat writers of the team, to take on a story like this, knowing that you're going to get a quote tweet from Mark Cuban about saying something that I can't repeat on this podcast probably, and just in another tweet saying, hey, I can't, he didn't reach out to me for the story. The writer, not Tim Cato, the writer didn't reach out to me for the story before it's published, but then he's quoted in the story. Just how is it your mindset taking on a story like this that's negative towards a team, but also could you clear up the Cuban? Did he get contacted before the story or did he not?
Yeah, he was reached before. It was not something that I was able to get on the phone with him before. It's the journalism practices when you're dropping stories like this is to, you gotta let people know with time. But it's a situation where I would have loved to have him on the record. And beyond that, I'll just kind of keep it between me and Mark. I'd say beyond that, yeah, it's weird tackling a story like this, certainly, as someone very, invested in the team from a professional standpoint and from a standpoint that, yeah, exactly. Look at that, man. That's a relic. That's a relic.
We're plugging his book right now on YouTube. Guys, go to Amazon. 100 things Mavericks fans should know and do before they die. Now you have 101. New edition that's coming out next year.
What's the 101st thing though? I'm not even sure what the 100 to read my story. My story. I mean, that might be it.
The reason why I grabbed this is because Mark Cuban did the forward and just completely calls you out today. I mean, what is that like? It's kind of just the, owner-reporter relationship. Like there's a little bit of a journalistic relationship there where you can't just always be buddy-buddy all the time. But what was it like to see, do all that reporting and then all of a sudden Cuban calls it out and said that's total BS just on Twitter to his 6 million or however many followers?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, he can say what he wants. It's the story's out there. I think the sourcing is clear, anonymous, but I try to do a very good job defining, where it's coming from in a lot of places. And the idea is that, there was this is spread very well around the league. I was on a locker room earlier, and Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer was like, yeah, I'd heard a lot about this. And and was saying stuff like that. The idea that there was a perception around the league about what the Mavericks were doing. This is in the article. League executives had confusion or weren't sure, who exactly was, pulling the shots, pulling the strings. At the same time, this is a franchise that has had very clearly defined power structures for a long time. That's something else that's in the story. And they've come to be known about that. And I don't, in that specific context of saying, all right, let's hear a new voice. Let's bring in someone like Bob who has influence. I think that's a good thing. I think we've seen the output of Donnie Nelson as the GM, someone who, even throughout these past few seasons, as detailed again in the piece, someone who was still spearheading trades and certainly still had influence and was still in his role as the president of basketball operations. I think it's very clear that they have a long track record. We can look at it. We can go look at it. We can look at what last decade looked like. From the moment they broke up the title team, from the moment they thought they were going to sign Darren Williams and Dwight Howard the following offseason. Something that I haven't reported that's been reported. I think even by Adrian Wojnarowski back at Yahoo. They thought those were the two players they were going to get. And then just in the years that have followed and the off seasons that have followed, their track record is out there for everybody to look at. And I think that, it's not something that needs to be reported to say, oh yeah, like we were saying that the Clippers loss and that's an indictment on the roster around Luka. And, it's not at a pivotal, crucial, terrible inflection point to the point that he wants out now. He doesn't. I say very clearly in the piece that, this is still somewhere that he would like to be long term. But, this front office, doesn't have the track record to bear out that they're the ones to do it. And so in that sense, yeah, bringing in someone like Bob, I think has merit, has value, but it wasn't done in a way that was successful or effective. And I think very clearly that is shown by, the level of details that is in the story that we reported, and just how much I've been hearing about this, and just how much confusion and frustration and the internal idea that nobody wants to look back in 5 years and say, we had Luka, we had the player of his generation, and somehow we messed that up. And there were very real concerns that was going to happen if things continued in the same path and manner that they did. And so that's really where I come down to on, the idea that, Mark can say what he wants. And, certainly he's someone I will talk to with concerns and anything like that. And, I don't mind him tweeting whatever he wants to tweet. That's obviously perfectly within his rights. But the idea, the broader idea, and this is really how I view the story, that the front office has, a level indictment for how the past decade has gone and how the past 2 seasons with Luka has gone. And it hasn't been successful. It hasn't been effective. That's all very real. You don't need reporting to know that's the case.
That's very true. That takes us to our Michelob Ultra Player of the Week, which is most of the time it's Luka. It's kind of an easy one here, but Michelob Ultra Player of the Week is Luka Doncic. So let's talk about Luka Doncic a little bit. This was something in the piece that I thought was really positive, is that we had heard him at exit interviews. You quoted him saying that, I think you know the answer when asked about if he's going to make that big extension, and that made us all smile. That was all an incredible moment. But then also in the piece, you say that multiple league sources say Doncic intends to sign the Supermax extension, which he'll be eligible for once he's named this year's All-NBA, which he's going to. That is a really huge thing, because a lot of people have been saying that, oh, Luka's going to leave, he's going to leave. But now it seems positive that he is going to stay at least through this next contract.
Yeah, I mean, even before I was hearing that, even before I was, able months ago to say, league sources say, he plans to sign the extension.
Yeah, right.
It always was the, by far what was going to happen. Like, something like that doesn't turn down that money. There's really no good example of that happening, of somebody actually going to the qualifying offer. This was always, I think, the outcome that was going to happen. And, but it's also something I wanted to express clearly in the piece. And one thing that isn't in the piece, and for good reason, because I didn't have merit or backing to report it, is that I never said Luka is like really, trying to throw his weight around and try to make specific things happen. I think if he had wanted to, he could have not said that he was going to sign the extension on exit interviews. And that would have been a pretty weighty thing to make sure you get your way.
Anything.
So
give him anything.
Exactly. Right. So I just want to be, I want to be clear that I don't have any evidence, and I do not believe that's really how Luka is approaching this. And, I think that's only a good thing. Like, he really loves Dallas. I feel like he's expressed that a lot, specifically. And I note this in the piece. I'm probably going to say that a lot, but just good.
That's what it's all about today. Yeah,
it's just good to cite it back to, like, okay, this is something I put in the piece and have reporting for. And so, he loves Dirk. Of course, he loves Dirk. We all know this, but he really, really loves Dirk, and that is someone who means a lot to him. That is something that has been such a positive development on his time here. Also in the piece, I say that he tried to push his way here. I can't really share details beyond that or specifics. And to be honest, like, I'd have to go back over my notes. Certainly it's something I've heard in like media circles for a long time. The idea that, that Luka Doncic did want to come to Dallas, but I think that's absolutely correct. And I think that, this is a place that right now he's happy with, but to remain happy at a place like this, if you are a superstar like him, you have to win playoff series. He has always won. We know this about him. He has always won at every single stop, of his professional career. And if that is not something that starts happening, then yes, you have to be concerned and you have to be worried about the future of, of his desire to remain here. We're in a player empowerment era. And we've seen enough examples of people who just were not satisfied, satiated with the excess, the success they're able to have. So I think again, that, this goes back to a lot of the internal concerns that, people very legitimately and realistically have about the future of the franchise. And, I think it was always leading to a moment this summer where, things were going to come to a head. The pot was going to boil over, whether I reported it or not, to be honest. If it wasn't me, it probably would have been someone else later this summer. But in the context of, is Luka happy now? Yeah. Does he want to win? Yeah. I mean, it's really as simple as that. And so that's the key going forwards.
That's a perfect way to end that. Enjoyment isn't the end game; it's the whole game. Luka doesn't want to just win. Luka doesn't want to just enjoy Dallas. He wants to actually win and enjoy Dallas. Create success. Michelob Ultra Player of the Week, Luka Doncic.
For Luka and his relationship with Dallas, could you give us more, or I guess you can relate back or go back to the piece on this? What's Luka's relationship like right now with Mark Cuban, the front office, and Rick Carlisle? Those three, and you touch on kind of each of them here and there. You touched on him and Rick's relationship for a couple paragraphs in that story too, which I thought was very intriguing. So yeah, Luka and each of those three, where are they at?
Let's see. With Mark, that's probably the one I touch on the least. I'm sure you saw that he listens to Luka. That's someone who he feels and tweeted that can bring him concerns. That seems fair to me. That seems accurate. I trust Mark on this one. Whether he feels he can bring, a dislike for a person who is clearly, most specifically someone backed and has influence over Mark, I don't know. But, I have no reason to believe that they have a bad relationship. And I think, the idea that generally Luka has a good relationship with Dallas has to stem to some level with Mark, even though he's responsible for everything that happens underneath him within this franchise. I have no reason to believe that they have anything other than a positive relationship right now. And that's pretty important to him, being happy here for now and trusting that things will get better, and just needing to make sure and see that it is that case. With Rick, I'm obviously not the first person to report about concerns or just questions about the relationship between the two of them. I think the most interesting thing with Carlisle for me is the adaptability. I think we even say adaptable like an MFer. And I'm trying to make sure I stick with the
brand safe here, Tim Cato on the Locked On.
It's been funny since some of the things I've had have been like hosts just like casually swearing as they ask me questions, and I'm just like always trying to balance, and then I'm on a radio hit and I'm like, ooh, cannot do that.
Trying to avoid those FCC fines over there on the radio.
Exactly. Because if somehow they got sent to me and I was the one to pay them, no. I make journalism money. I don't make a radio host money. I think with Rick, he is a very adaptable person. I think that you can see the development that he's talked about Luka. Really, probably starting the December of his rookie season, when he really started pushing. Maybe pushing isn't even the right word, because it was the reality. He was like, this is the face of the franchise. And, you could probably read into subtext as like, I'm going to treat him differently than I would a different rookie point guard. We know what Rick hates most. It's like live ball turnovers. That is something that he allowed Luka to work through over time, especially in that first season when, the team wasn't, headed to the playoffs. But even in the time since then, I think he's been very adaptable in the way that he's started to approach and handle and coach Luka. Whether that's been enough is something that's been put into question with me by a lot of people in a lot of areas for probably even longer than I've been reporting this specific story. The idea that they just Luka might just have tuned him out for seasons now, especially following the rookie season when there was a lot more pressure and a lot more winning happening, but probably not enough, as the team got it to a 7th seed and then a 5th seed, that is something that's been called into question. And all I can say, in terms of the reporting that's in the story is that, Rick has been adaptable. I think another example of his adaptability is the way he talks about analytics. Like we all know the post up is not a good play. We know that segment from him talking about Kristaps Porzingis answering inside the NBA, people saying that they just want KB to post up anymore. They just don't want him to post up anymore. Yeah, I mean, he was right. I also view the sport pretty analytically. I can actually, like, it makes a lot of sense that a lot of what Bob, with an analytics mindset, would say and share and think that the direction that's the team should be going. There's a lot of evidence to think that Rick probably agreed with a lot of it, just based off what he said and the way that he, you guys hear his post-game interviews. He every once in a while will just casually drop in, like really high
plus minus.
Yeah, that, but in a sense, like they're always tracking that stuff. And, I think, I've even heard him talk about like, player pairings and, matchup data versus how one player guards another player. I think that's all really interesting and in a positive way for a franchise to be thinking about things. And so the broader point, and I'm finally bringing this back to Luka and Rick specifically, I do believe very strongly and firmly and based off all the reporting that we've done with people who definitely have an understanding, is that, he adapted. He's adapted as well as he can, and whether that's enough, I think has been called into question and by people who would know better than me. I'm just the reporter here. I don't seek an end game or anything like that, of course. But there's a lot of people who remain calling into question, whether Rick is the right voice for Luka going forwards. And, that's happening from a lot of different places. And I think that's a concern. What's the last one? Just Luka and Bob?
That was it. No, that was it. It was
okay.
Rick,
Okay. That was a long soliloquy from me. So I think it's best to let you guys bounce some questions off again.
Yeah,
this isn't the Tim Cato podcast.
we could make that happen. Rick being adaptable, I think, was I thought a good part of the story, because he has been. I think that he has changed some things. It's not like he gets painted sometimes as this disgruntled, type of coach that just sticks to his one way and doesn't do anything different, but he has changed, I think. And so I thought that was a good thing, even though, like you said, is it enough? Not sure, but he has at least made steps and moves to go in that direction. Coming up, we're going to keep with Tim Cato here. I got to ask about the 2020 draft, because that part of the piece was just really, really interesting to me. We'll talk more about this with Tim Cato of The Athletic. But before we do, BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball is in full swing right now. You can track all of it at betonline.ag. Get all the latest news, odds, and info for all of your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, and all MMA action. Before you get to your next pitch, head over to BetOnline, and on your laptop, mobile device, whatever you do, use the promo code LOCKEDON. Get a 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. You can bet on all sorts of different stuff. I don't think you can bet on if Rick Carlisle or Donnie Nelson will get fired first, but maybe they're going to have odds like that. They just had which team Porzingis will play for next, so maybe they'll have something like that. Keep checking back. Again, promo code LOCKEDON for a 50% welcome bonus. Also, want to tell you about rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models of cars, you need something reliable to go to and know exactly what you're getting. The Dallas Mavericks hired Haralabos Voulgaris, and they didn't know exactly what they were getting, apparently. They needed to go use the rockauto.com of NBA front office deals. And so use rockauto.com. They have a catalog that's unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle. Choose the brand, specifications, and prices that you prefer. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Lockdown in there. How did you hear about us box? And they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, we're here with Tim Cato, obviously Isaac Harris as well. The 2020 draft was a section in your piece that I found really fascinating, because the 2020 draft perplexed me to no end. How did Saddiq Bey just fall right by them? That seemed like the guy they really wanted to go for. Desmond Bane apparently was not even in the plans. People have said here and there. And then they come out with three guys. They come out with Josh Green. They come out with Tyler Bey and Tyrell Terry, and then none of those guys can get any run the whole game. And so it seems like that if you take just the 2020 draft and you look at it from start to the end of their rookie year, you could just tell just by that there was that was a symptom of some kind of dysfunction in the front office. Who made the picks, who decided to play them and not decided to play them, and all of that, because there wasn't any development. People were talking about how many times did your mentions just get filled up with, they should play Josh Green. They should play Josh Green. Like every single time. So in a piece, you say multiple league sources, team sources paint that the 2020 draft as part of a particularly egregious example of Voulgaris' power. An evening one source described as embarrassing. Most members of the scouting department joined the team's war room remotely through Zoom, and when Voulgaris attended in person, didn't consult them for either of the team's first selections, Josh Green or Tyrell Terry. What do you think about this 2020 draft? Do you think it is like a symptom of this dysfunction in the front office, and what do you make of it now?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is, there may be reporting out there that says who they wanted. I specifically did not put that in the story.
Yeah, you didn't.
Very specifically, I don't think it's fair to Josh Green to kind of, especially in a piece like this, to go through and say, oh, they wanted this other person, and just make that a driving narrative of the story. So, if there may be other reporting about that out there, I believe there may have been something last week. I don't know if that's true. Or at very minimum, I'm definitely not going to confirm or anything like that. I just don't think it's fair to Josh Green. I would say that, honestly, the way I want to answer this is, I'll work to the story. I'd say generally, the way I've talked about this on my own podcast and in writing and stuff like that, the podcast I jokingly refer to as the only Mavericks podcast, because we entered this space so late and joined a million other. I mean, I've had you guys on like that. There one or two people reach out to me and are like, they're being so helpful, and I felt so bad. They're like, hey, by the way, there's like the Lockdown Mavericks podcast. I'm like, yes, I do. Like that's the joke. I love all of you guys, and I love all the podcasts. And anyway, I just wanted to clear that up. If anybody was, if there's any Locked On stans who are out here, just like rejecting my podcast in disgust, being like, how could they not know this? Anyway,
well, we always tout ours as the best daily because it is the only daily one.
It is. That's the thing. We all do different things too. Like I think there is actually room for all of us to kind of exist in our different spheres and perspectives and. All right. That was very Nerlens Noel, that one gif of him on the draft where it's just like his hand looks huge. That was wild. Anyway, I'm bringing this back into focus.
Going off the rails is what this. So you said there's room for all kinds of podcasts. That's what Locked On Mavs does best, is completely going off the rails.
I don't think Haralabos offered Nerlens $70 million. So.
I would say that checks that sounds right. That sounds right. I can't report anything like that, and I don't even know if I've reported about it. I would say that sounds right. Definitely sounds right. I think that the front office inability, the inability of the front office to build a team around Luka that had enough depth and was functional enough that they weren't going and dropping down to players like Wes Iwundu, who clearly didn't work, or James Johnson, who was easily shipped out without really a concern about it. I think that made the draft picks look worse than they did. I think that especially Tyrell Terry, who I loved as a draft pick, I see a lot in Josh Green, where I think he could be a really positive player. Nobody thought those two players were ready now. And the fact that the Mavericks drafted two players who weren't ready now, while also having a roster that was trying to win, was trying to push for a top first seed, but in the end, ultimately was also not ready now. I think that all culminated in, casting those draft picks in a unfortunate light. As far as the reporting itself, to me, what it represented was the level of influence Bob had over the team. Even if people want to, push back and say, well, Donnie spearheaded these trades and, Bob had nothing to do with them, which my reporting is that, he was on board with the trades and more or less approved them, but they were spearheaded by Donnie Nelson. And that's a lot of the clashing of heads and the unclear, kind of trajectories or through lines of the front office that, caused this to come to a head. But that was a specific moment where Donnie Nelson is most known for the draft, and the scouting department that the Mavericks have obviously, but always been something they've publicly touted and publicly touted how effective and good at their jobs they were. And for that draft room to work that way, for the decisions to be made specifically more or less by one person, whether it was Cuban saying let's go with Bob, or whether it was Bob saying let's make this pick, or whatever the specific ramifications or dynamics of how it actually happened in that draft room. All I know is that functionally Bob was the one making the picks, and it wasn't something where the scouts were addressed or, wasn't something where they were consulted. And it was a change. It was a change of how things have operated in the past. Maybe a observer can look at the draft history of this team, outside of the two huge hits they've had in Luka and in Dirk, obviously, 2 decades ago. Although that was a very different front office and scouting department, and all that in charge. But
Giannis is the other one that people are going to.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe I think that there are clearly good examples of the team that I want to say there's a stat out there where the only team that had worse draft positioning than Dallas from like 2016 was San Antonio, which makes total sense. And just look at how good the team was, but also how liberally they traded draft picks. Yeah, they never were picking really in great positions. I don't know. Maybe your stance is that it was time to trust a different voice, which I think in a lot of ways Bob represented in this front office. But that moment, represented more than that. It represented to me, and to me as a reporter putting together what I'm hearing from different people, it represented a moment where the power delineation and the power lines of the franchise were kind of laid bare, even if they're messy in other ways. Even if there is an idea that there's 2 general managers, even if there is an idea that sometimes Donnie is initiating stuff, sometimes Bob is the most significant influence in the team. I think it's clear that draft night kind of showed that if as one team source was quoted in this story, that if Mark Cuban is the most powerful person in the organization, whoever he's listening to is second. That person in that moment, and I think more broadly over the past few seasons, has been Bob, and it absolutely was very clearly shown to the rest of the franchise in kind of that night, and with everything that happened that night. So
I think one of the things that fascinated me the most about your piece was just how much influence Bob had and has. I'm gonna walk this very thin line right now. I'd heard about the tension a little bit, just front office stuff, but I didn't know. And I think that's expected, right? I mean, anytime you bring a professional sports gambler into an NBA franchise that has had this continuity for so long in decision making, it is going to bring a little bit of tension, right? You want to hear their input. That happens in any workplace that you bring somebody.
If Cuban would have brought in anybody, right? Like
so
brings in somebody to talk on their job.
And you hear bits and pieces of like what new player is kind of assigned to that guy, like you putting in the story so we can talk about it. DeLon Wright being Bob's guy, that he was all about DeLon Wright, the pairing as to Luka and all. And I just didn't know the extent of that. And your piece just brought a whole brand new light to what the front office, how the decision making goes, and just how much influence Bob has in the front office in this new-ish title role over the past 3 years. So I guess my biggest question to you now is, like, where do they go? Like, what's the next step for the franchise, the team? Is Bob still with the team? Is he going to be with the team? And like, where does the team move forward right now after this story? Right.
Yeah, I mean, the truly most honest answer is I don't know. I don't know for sure. I would be surprised if the exact same power structure and the exact same people and just the way that it was set up over the past few years stayed to be, exactly the same. I don't think that seems tenable. But I think that was always going to be the case, this summer, that something was going to give one way or the other, and that, that even internally, the confusion and the unclear nature of who had power, who was making decisions, who Cuban was listening to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's something that, was reaching a breaking point. That's why so many people around the league had a clear understanding of the sides and the frustrations, and everything that is in that piece. So, like one thing I've said this on a couple appearances I've made since dropping the story. I come back to the idea that I think the way Bob thinks about basketball is probably pretty close to how I think about basketball in a lot of ways. This is a results business, and it, at some point, even if you make things with the right process, it doesn't really matter. It matters that, process matters, but it matters, especially in this industry, in this sport, in this, league, it matters that you win. That's what Luka is ultimately going to judge, a team on and the people around a team. I think it was a good idea based off the track record, based on the tenure of the front office and all these things we said. I do think it was probably a good time to bring in a new voice. It doesn't, it's aggressively clear in the piece that, it was not implemented well. It was not done in an effective manner. But the idea that the Mavericks have been a longstanding organization with the certain power structures they have, yeah. I mean, that's a, I think that the track record, and I'm repeating myself a little bit, I think that the track record shows that, it's more than any one person. A lot of this has to do with just the way the team has operated over a decade and a half, and they need people in place who can build a team and build a roster around Luka that's going to work. And the fear is that they don't have that. The fear from a lot of sides, and the observation from people who have close working understandings of kind of how the dynamics work internally, et cetera, at all that. So that was kind of an answer, right?
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah. I love circling around an answer like 3 times, like a flight, and then just eventually landing in the field next to the airplane without directly answering the question down the runway that you guys want. But
no, I love it. Well, you mentioned roster, and this is the last question we want to throw at you. KP situation in Dallas, just where is that at right now? Do you expect him to be on this team moving forward? Do you expect him to, what's the thought process of all the parties involved moving forward from this point on?
KP was someone I thought would come up more, especially like very early on. I was like, oh, there's something wrong. There's something going on. Oh, it has to be about Luka and KP. I have no evidence that's the case. It wasn't a situation where we had a section written and just couldn't confirm it well enough to be comfortable running it with it. I'm to KP's credit, I have seen him in post-game interviews really try to overwrite or rebrand, I think, the image he had in New York. How true that image was in New York, where he had an agent brother, or he was leaking stuff, or disgruntled, I don't know. That's not my reporting, and it's not something I've ever really dove into or had a reason to. But I've seen a person who talked about accepting his role and has been very honest and forthright about okay, my best role in the series, they tell me, and I trust them, and I'm trying to implement it, is to be a decoy against the Clippers. Now, bigger than that, obviously, you don't pay a player $30 million, and for the money they are over the next 3 seasons to be a decoy. I might be the I would still love for it to work out, because if Porzingis is the player he can be, that's a player really unlike anyone quite in the NBA. But he hasn't quite been a good enough shooter in some ways. Like he's a good shooter. He's I'd say he's probably a touch below great, but he's not like a Klay Thompson shooter. Like I think you guys have probably talked about this too, like 7'3" Klay Thompson. Is that something that has come up? I know I've definitely used that term, but he's not a Klay Thompson level shooter, and in the defense slipped this year, and that's a real concern. So I don't know. I think that if you're Porzingis, if you're the Mavericks, it's becoming a lot harder, and this is only the obvious to view him as the star partner to Doncic as in the coming seasons. I don't know if there's even if they had a desire to trade him this year, which I didn't report, and don't have the backing to report. Even if they did want to do that, I don't know if there's a home for him. I think it does feel like the best case scenario is he comes back next season and has a really, really good season, or start to the season to the point that maybe you can go trade him then. But This is just me speculating.
Anything before the trade deadline, can it be really good?
Right. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like I said, as far as like reporting and the story and everything to that context, it's just not something that really came up or was something that was felt like it was anywhere as important or anywhere close to the level of what I was what I ended up reporting on throughout the story. There just really isn't anything there that I've heard, and if there is something there, then it's not a concern of people that they're bringing it up in the same breath that they're worried about Bob's role or worried about the front office going forward. So, I understand the concerns.
Maybe the front office is like really locked in sync of keeping that story tight-lipped, and it's not.
I don't know.
Tim Cato just wrote on, or not Tim Cato. Tim McMahon just wrote on that, and there wasn't a ton there either, right? It was just kind of like public comments and things like that. So, I think both of these are.
Yeah, what McMahon said was, about as much as I've heard, just that KP wants to view himself as the second star, but hasn't proven that Luka has lost faith in him, his ability to be that. I mean, I'm, if I'm misconstruing what Tim McMahon says, like that's kind of was my takeaway from what he said, and I think that jives with what I've been told. And maybe I'm hyping it up a little bit, but I think that's essentially what McMahon said, and that's as far as I know, pretty much all that is going on. I mean, I reported, headed into the first round series against the Clippers, I did write a little bit about Luka and KP and how they did have a friendship, a relationship, like they were often seen around. In the bubble, they're often seen at the pool and stuff. And the idea of them being that close, even in public settings, hangouts where they can't hang out with anybody else. It does feel like that's a little more distant, a little harder to get back to. But, I also wrote in there, there's repeatedly, I've been told by, anybody I talk to that, there's no incident that's hiding or lurking beneath the surface. So, if that does exist, then it's probably never getting out or is going to take Luka or KP talking about it at some point. Beyond that, I guess we'll see, man.
So Nick often jokes with me and calls me the one more thing king. I lied. I have one last question. If the average Maverick fan listening to this right now, they read your story, they're listening to this, and they're worried about Luka Doncic and his future as a Maverick.
NBA Central, just giant, massive NBA Twitter account comes out today and says, quote, "There's concern internally about Luka Doncic's desire to remain in Dallas long-term, per The Athletic," right? Like stuff like that gets now written by, like completely taken out of context from what you said. Continue.
See, I should quote tweet that with the same thing Cuban quote tweeted my story with, because I know we feel the same way about like, out of context aggregators like that. That's not what I said at any point.
Yeah, so like, what's your message to that Mavericks fan? That Mavericks fan today, like, I mean, I got texts throughout the day from friends, random friends, like Mavs fans saying, "Oh my gosh, is this the beginning of the end?" Like, what's your message to Mavericks fans right now, reading your story, listening to this podcast, and they're worried that, man, Luka he might be done in Dallas?
Yeah, I would say it's not what the story says. I would say that the fears expressed is what any fan of a superstar, that isn't, a title contender every year. That's what every fan should be worried about. There's only one Dirk Nowitzki. It's not fair to look at Luka and be like, well, okay, he's going to be similar. Like Dirk Nowitzki was a unique, one of a kind, special, completely, unapproachable star in that way, and both the patience he shared and showed to the Mavericks. But and I think the era around superstars has changed as well to a degree. So I would say that there's no more, with Luka specifically, there should not be any more fears than there were before, except for the fact that there are a lot of people who are concerned that the Mavericks have the ability to build the roster that is going to entice him to stay and continue his desire to want to be here long term. And again, not to go back so much as I've been saying, like, oh, you don't even need my reporting. Like, it's I put it out there for a reason. I think it was important to share, and I feel like it was truthful. And that said, I think that the ideas about Luka and his time here with the Mavericks and whether it could change if they don't continue winning, that is something we know. That is something we know about the NBA. That's something we know about stars. And the idea that the Mavericks front office, as it's existed, both long-term and short-term, has not given, should not give anybody the confidence that they're going to figure this out and do things the right way. Their track record doesn't show that. And I don't think it's overly harsh or blunt to say, really sharply that they haven't done a good enough job. It doesn't matter who is ultimately making the calls. The people who have been entrusted with that over time, over a decade, have not done that. And so it's not, it's probably not the best. I'm not filling people with joy and roses or whatever. There's some expression like that. But at the same time, this is what the NBA is. This is what sports is. And these are the high stakes that everybody operates with. And so, just understand the context of the league when you kind of consider the Mavericks. And I think that's the biggest takeaway is that, if any of it was not fully expressed or understood, just kind of understand these are the underpinnings of the league that have always existed for a long time.
Tim Cato, the piece is inside the Mavericks front office. Mark Cuban's shadow GM is causing a rift with Luka Doncic by Tim Cato and Sam Amick as well. Go read it on The Athletic. If you got through this podcast and haven't read it already, I'm not sure what's going on with you, but follow Tim Cato. I'll put a link in the description of the podcast. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.